Imagine being alone in the desert, surrounded by silence so absolute that your every heartbeat echoes like thunder. The heat of the day mixes with the weight of a mission you don't even understand yet. Moses, a man who fled his past, now walks among the sands of the unknown, unaware that he is about to hear the most enigmatic, powerful and transformative words ever spoken by the divine voice. It wasn't in a synagogue, it wasn't before kings, it was in the middle of nowhere, on Mount Horeb, among rocks and dust, where the Eternal decides to break the veil of the ordinary and reveal one of the greatest secrets of the universe. A bush begins to burn without being consumed, something impossible. Moses approaches, and then a voice. Not an ordinary voice, but one that pierces the soul, the voice of God himself. Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place you are on is holy ground. But it's what comes after that changes everything. When Moses asks, "Who are you?" God does not respond with a common name. He does not say, "I am the Creator, I am the Almighty," or any other glorious title. He says, "I am that I am." 3 words that have echoed for millennia. 3 words that defy logic, that shatter time, that reveal more than a name. They reveal an eternal nature. What did God mean by this? What mystery is there in this I am? What is the true meaning that many have not yet realized? Get ready to dive into a revelation that goes far beyond a name, because this answer wasn't just for Moses. It was for me, for you, and for all humanity. A person's name carries identity, history, origin. When we say who we are, we offer the world a definition, a starting point. But when Moses, confused and fearful, questions God's identity in the middle of the desert, he is not given a common definition. He hears something that transcends time, logic, and even human understanding. I am that I am. A statement that seems simple, but carries an abyss of mystery and power. Because this is not just a phrase, it is the essence of God himself, revealing himself in a raw, absolute, and eternal way. At that moment, Moses is not just given a name to tell the Hebrews. He receives a truth that crosses time and reaches us today, like a flame that never goes out. But do we really understand what God meant? Or have we become accustomed to hearing I am as a mystical title without exploring its deeper implications? Could there be a hidden code there? A revelation that changes everything about how we see God and even how we see ourselves? This video is more than an explanation. It's an invitation, a call to open our eyes to something that has always been before us, but that only few have really seen. Let's explore part by part the moment when the Creator of the universe revealed his purest essence to a simple man, lost in the desert. And in the process, you may discover that that same voice still echoes, whispering deep within your soul, saying, I am, and I am here. Moses walked like someone running away from a past that insists on shouting, Prince of Egypt? That's behind us. Now, he was just a shepherd, lost among mountains and memories, trying to erase the marks of a mistake that cost him his position, his home, and almost his life. But what he didn't know was that God's plans tend to flourish precisely in the desert. That day, nothing seemed special. The sky, the wind, the rocks, everything was the same as the others, until he saw something strange. A bush burned with fire, but was not consumed. The fire burned, yes, but the leaves remained intact. It was a fire that did not destroy, a fire that called. And Moses, curious, approaches. And there it all begins. No warning, no music, no ceremony. A voice tears through the silence of the universe. Moses, Moses. He stops, tremendous, and listen. Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place you are on is holy ground. Why take off your sandals? Because there is no common place when the Eternal manifests itself. God was there, but who was he? Moses, confused, asks, "Who are you?" "When I come to the children of Israel and say, 'The God of your fathers sent me,' and they ask me, 'What is your name?' what will I tell them?" The answer does not come as a title, nor as a divine CV. It is not the Creator, the Protector, the Almighty. God simply says, "I am that I am," and he adds, "This is what you will say to the children of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" At that moment, a new reality opens up. "I am" is not just a phrase, it is a break with time. It is the declaration of a God who has no beginning or end, who does not depend on anything or anyone to be. He simply and. While Moses trembles at the inexplicable, he may not realize it, but that answer is not just for the Hebrew people. It is for every human being who has ever asked themselves, who really is God? How can I get closer to him? Is he listening? The I Am answers all of this and more, and what comes next reveals even deeper layers of that name, which is not a name, but a pure, continuous, eternal existence. Moses' encounter with God on Mount Horeb is not just a revelatory experience. It is a milestone of spiritual transformation. When God presents himself to Moses, he does not do so in an ordinary way. He does not present himself simply as a distant figure or a being of incomprehensible power, but as I am. This simple phrase has immense depth and overwhelming power. What God is saying is not just about his identity, but about his absolute existence, beyond time and space. It is a concept that Moses, standing before the burning bush, can barely understand. By saying I am, God not only reveals who he is, but also redefines what it means to exist. It is not defined by anything external. He simply is. This active verb brings to light the idea of an eternal presence, without beginning or end, transcendent and immutable. Imagine the impact of this revelation to Moses. He was faced with something that was impossible to fully understand, something beyond any human reference. God is not just saying that he exists, but that he is the center of reality, the cause of all that is and will be. Moses, in the context of his life as a fugitive, a man with doubts about himself and his mission, is now given an identity that goes beyond what he ever imagined. God, in revealing himself in this way, is not only showing the power of his presence, but also providing Moses with a key to understanding the role he was to play. By stating I am, God was revealing that he is the source of everything, and that Moses, by connecting with him, would be connecting to the very essence of being. This revelation of I am has powerful implications that continue to this day. When God presents himself in this way, he is not just revealing himself as a distant authority, but as the only source of true identity. And that is why Jesus later uses the same verb to describe himself. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life, confirming that he is the continuation of the promise made on Mount Horeb. This continuity brings to light a fundamental truth. Our identity is deeply linked to the identity of God. When we understand who he is, we begin to understand who we are. God is not only the creator of the universe, it is the key to understanding our own purpose and existence, and this is where the mystery intensifies. By stating I am, God is also saying that we, by recognizing him, begin to reflect his image and likeness. This divine identity is the foundation upon which our lives gain meaning. We are not defined by the circumstances we face, but by the I am that calls us to eternal life. What seems like a simple declaration of identity actually becomes a transformative revelation, both for Moses and for us. As Moses hears these words, he finds himself in deep inner conflict. As an ordinary man, with all his flaws, imperfections and fears, he begins to understand that he is not facing a simple encounter with any divinity, but with the creator of the universe himself. The revelation of the I Am transforms the concept of God from an abstract idea to a real, palpable and active presence. God is not something distant or inaccessible. He is what he is, what he always was and always will be. This changes everything. Moses himself, who doubted his ability to fulfill the mission given to him, is now called to take this message to the people of Israel. But the message is not just about who God is, but about what he is able to do through Moses. The I Am carries with it the fundamental truth that the nature of God transcends human understanding. But this transcendence does not make it inaccessible. On the contrary, God desires a personal relationship with those who seek him. By affirming I Am, he reveals a God who is in everything at all times, in control of all creation, but who also cares deeply about the actions and decisions of each human being. This makes Moses understand that he is not alone. He is just an instrument, a vessel in the hands of an eternal and unchanging God. Moses' mission, therefore, is not just any mission, but a mission that carries with it the authority of the Creator himself. As much as Moses is still in doubt, what God is saying is clear. I am the source of everything, and through you, my power will be manifested to the people. This statement marks the turning point in the story of Moses. The man who fled a life of guilt and regret now finds himself facing a divine call that can no longer be ignored. I Am is not just a revelation of identity, it is a call to action. It is the guarantee that divine power will be with him, regardless of his insecurities and fears. Moses may even question his own abilities, but the presence of God at his side empowers him in a supernatural way. And so, God not only reveals who he is, but also reveals Moses' role in the divine plan. He is a chosen one, but not by his strength or wisdom, but by the strength of God, who now dwells in him. The strength of divine identity is reflected in the character of those who surrender to God's will. Moses then begins to understand that the mission given to him does not depend on his own ability, but on the I Am that sustains and guides him. This revelation changes Moses' perspective and that of anyone willing to understand the truth of who God really is. As Moses begins to assimilate the enormity of this revelation, he realizes that the mission he is about to embrace is not just a matter of carrying a message, but of living a transformative and divine experience. The revelation of God as I Am is in fact an invitation to a journey of faith and surrender. God not only reveals his name, but also positions himself as the absolute source of authority and power. This implies that, in bringing this message to the people, Moses will not only be representing the will of a superior being, but of a power that transcends all human and natural barriers. At this moment, Moses begins to understand that he is not alone. No matter how insignificant he feels, in light of the monumental task he's about to take on, the I Am that God revealed is the guarantee that he will be present at every step of the journey. God not only sends Moses as a leader, he sends him as an agent of change, a channel of his strength, which, despite being invisible and immutable, will be palpably manifested through Moses. I Am is a reminder that Moses' mission is part of a much larger plan that extends far beyond his understanding. As Moses reflects on this revelation, he finds himself confronted by a dilemma that is deeply human. Does he have the strength and courage to move forward? He questions his own abilities, his speech, his qualities as a leader. But God, in his infinite patience and wisdom, begins to reveal to Moses that true strength lies not in his natural abilities, but in the divine power that will accompany him. The power of I Am is not in Moses himself, but in the one who sent him. Moses must learn to trust not in his own strength, but in the power of God flowing through him. This shift in perspective is essential because not only does Moses need to believe in himself, but more importantly, he needs to fully trust God. The I am is not just a title or a statement of identity, it's a promise that God is with him in all circumstances, in all adversities, in all the challenges that lie ahead. And most importantly, it is a promise that God himself, in all his majesty, will be the source of power and direction at every crucial moment. God's I am is a profound truth, a solid foundation on which Moses can build his mission. He understands now that it is not his own ability that will make him successful, but the divine strength that will sustain him. This profound and transformative revelation brings Moses back to the center of his faith, to the place where trust in God becomes the only thing necessary to move forward. As Moses continues his conversation with God, he begins to feel the weight of his responsibility. The mission is colossal, and he understands that he is not just carrying a role as leader of the people, but being the vehicle through which God will manifest his power and his will. The I am is not just an answer to Moses' doubt, but a confirmation that God is the source of everything. God is telling Moses and us that he is the essence of all that exists, that he is the foundation of creation, and that his presence permeates all things, invisibly but undeniably real. However, divine revelation brings with it a challenge: total surrender to God's will. The trust in God, which Moses is now called to have, is absolute trust. It is not just believing that God exists, but trusting his promises and his control over the future. Moses finds himself faced with a paradox. He needs to act, but without depending on his own strength. He must be a leader, but true leadership comes from a place of humility and surrender to something greater than himself. The I am demands that he surrender to the divine will, that he allows God to lead him in every step. The revelation of God as I am also makes Moses question the nature of power. To the world, power means control, wealth, and status. But God, by revealing himself as I am, redefines the concept of power. He is not concerned with outward appearances or the power structures that the world values. God's power is intrinsic. It is in his very existence. He is power not because he has control of circumstances, but because he is the origin of everything that is, was, and will be. And by trusting in the I am, Moses begins to understand that true power is not given by external sources, but by a direct connection with the divine essence. When Moses, now calmer and more aware of his mission, asks how he should respond to the people of Israel, God instructs him to present himself as the one sent by the I am. This phrase, I am, echoes with immense weight. This is not a simple explanation of who he is, but an affirmation of his authority and continued presence throughout human history. Moses' mission is not just a task to be accomplished, but a profound spiritual movement where the revelation of God is present in every action, in every word, and in every gesture. Moses is not just talking about a distant God, but a God who is with him in every moment. At the same time, Moses begins to understand that the revelation of I am is, in fact, an invitation to live in a different way. God is calling Moses and humanity to live not just with faith, but with an active faith which manifests itself in actions. The I am is calling Moses to go beyond his comfort zone, to accept that he, an ordinary man, is now being called to perform extraordinary feats through divine authority. This is the moment of transformation. Moses is no longer just a man, but an instrument of the I am, who from that moment on will become the leader of the people chosen by God. As Moses receives more instructions from God, he is made to understand that the mission he has been called to will not be easy. It's not just about freeing the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt, but about guiding them to a new understanding of who God is and what he wants for the future. Moses' journey will be full of challenges, but these challenges are also opportunities for the manifestation of divine power. The revelation of I Am then becomes a constant reminder that no matter how difficult the obstacles, God is with him every step of the way. There is no situation in which God is absent, no circumstance that he cannot dominate. However, the weight of the mission is still great for Moses. He knows that Pharaoh's resistance will be fierce. The people of Israel, imprisoned for generations, are accustomed to a life of suffering and conformity. How can Moses convince these people to believe in the impossible? How can he show that, even in the face of such adversity, God is with them? Fear, doubt, and uncertainty begin to take over Moses. He has questioned himself several times. He has pondered his ability to handle such responsibility. The I Am, however, offers the definitive answer. The mission does not depend on the strength of Moses, but on the action of God through him. God promises to be with Moses at all times, and this promise is not just an empty word. Throughout his journey, Moses will see signs and wonders that confirm that God's action is real and powerful. Moses' transformation begins to happen within him. He who previously doubted now begins to trust God completely. The I Am begins to resonate more deeply in his heart, and he begins to see himself as the agent of change that transcends his own understanding. What is about to happen is no longer just a simple liberation, but the manifestation of the divine plan for the world. God's promise to be with him, to be the God who never fails, begins to make sense. Moses finally understands that his mission is not about his personal capabilities, but about being a channel through which God will reveal himself to the world. The I Am is ultimately the guarantee that victory will not come through force or human planning, but through God's direct intervention in history. And it is this certainty that strengthens Moses for what is to come. God is not just an abstract idea, but a present and active force, ready to transform the entire reality of an oppressed people. By understanding that God is the I Am, Moses allows himself to let go of his own fear and doubt. He begins to perceive himself as an instrument of God, not as someone who should be the hero of the story, but as someone who is being used by God to fulfill a greater mission. With this change in perspective, Moses, now stronger, prepares to face the Pharaoh. The journey to freedom for the people of Israel is about to begin, and Moses now feels more prepared to lead. He no longer leads based on his own abilities, but with the trust that the I Am is with him, guiding his every step. With the decision made and the certainty that God is with him, Moses heads to Egypt to confront the Pharaoh. The challenge is immense. The first meeting with the king of Egypt is marked by a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere. Moses, faced with the majesty and power of Pharaoh, finds himself in a vulnerable position. He is not there just to ask, but to demand the liberation of the people of Israel. But how can you convince a man who considers himself God to free millions of enslaved people? How can we face an empire that seems unbeatable, whose strength and dominance seem invulnerable? God, however, had already warned Moses that the journey would not be easy. Pharaoh would refuse, he knew that. But what happened next would reveal the true power of God. It would not be human strength or political strategies that would break Pharaoh's rule, but God's supernatural power. Pharaoh's first reaction is disdain. He laughs at Moses' proposal, ignoring the words of liberation, thinking that nothing can challenge his authority. He sees himself as unbeatable. The I Am is still far from the understanding of your heart, but what Pharaoh doesn't know is that the truth of I Am begins to manifest itself in ways he never imagined. Moses, guided by divine direction, begins to perform signs and wonders before Pharaoh, signs that confirm that God's power cannot be ignored. The water turns to blood, frogs invade Egypt, lice and flies take over the land. But even in the face of these powerful signs, Pharaoh hardens. He insists on not giving in, thinking he can resist the divine will. God knew that Pharaoh's resistance would be difficult, but he also knew that with each obstacle, his glory would once again be revealed. The I Am is not just a name, it is a presence, an active force in the life of Moses and in the lives of the people of Israel. As the plagues continue to intensify, tension grows, and Pharaoh begins to feel the weight of divine wrath. Its resistance, however, is not immediate. He still refuses to let the people leave, despite seeing with his own eyes the supernatural power at work. Egypt's suffering only increases. At this point, doubt still persists in Moses' heart. He knows that God's power is absolute, but will Pharaoh really bow before him? He questions whether the suffering of the people of Israel will continue, whether the promise of liberation will be fulfilled. Fear begins to rise again in your heart. And it is precisely here that I Am comes into play in an even more impressive way. God once again shows Moses that he is in control. Even if Pharaoh refuses to recognize, God does not need human acceptance to act. Divine power is sovereign and irrefutable, and so the last plagues, more devastating than the previous ones, are released upon Egypt. The night of Easter, the night of the great deliverance, arrives, and the people of Israel, for the first time in centuries, feel the relief of the promise fulfilled. The death of the firstborn Egyptian will be the last blow that will force the Pharaoh to give in. When Pharaoh finally surrenders and allows the people of Israel to leave, he not only releases physical slavery, but he also finds himself faced with the force he could never control, the God of Moses, the I Am. This revelation will be the key to the liberation of the people of Israel, and the journey to the Promised Land begins with the certainty that God has always been with them. With the people of Israel finally freed from Egypt, the journey through the desert begins. But what seemed to be the end of a journey of suffering and slavery soon reveals new, even more intense challenges. Moses, guided by the I Am, now has the responsibility of leading millions of people to the Promised Land, an unknown, arid, and uncertain territory. The desert becomes not only a physical setting, but also a spiritual proving ground. In the first few days, the people experience the relief of freedom, but soon begin to face the harsh reality of their new condition. The desert, with its vastness and aridity, begins to sap the strength of those who were accustomed to slavery, but who now find themselves without enough food and water. Anxiety and fear begin to take over many. The I Am, which until then had freed them, is now questioned. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in this desert? Many murmur. They began to doubt that God had truly delivered them. They miss the foods they had in Egypt, the onions and garlic. Despair takes over, and an atmosphere of disbelief begins to spread among the people. Did Moses know what he was doing? Did God really have a plan for them? They were now aimless, without resources, and God's promises seemed distant. It was in this moment of crisis that God, once again, revealed himself to his people in an extraordinary way. He sends manna from heaven to feed the people, an invisible food which fell like dew every morning, providing sustenance for millions of people in the middle of the desert. And that's not all. I Am also guarantees that there will never be a shortage of water. In a desolate setting, he orders Moses to break a rock, and abundant water gushes out of it, enough to quench everyone's thirst. But the people who had experienced such powerful miracles still find themselves testing divine patience. The murmurs continue. They begin to question Moses' leadership, even wanting to return to Egypt, where despite slavery, they were at least guaranteed food. This contrast between salvation and human unbelief is marked by Moses' frustration, who, despite being the leader chosen by God, begins to feel the weight of responsibility and criticism. "How long will I have to put up with these people?" Moses, exhausted and anguished, asks himself. He sees unbelief taking over, and his confidence in God's promises for a moment is shaken, even though he knows that the I Am is with him. Moses feels that the weight of the mission is exceeding his strength. The desert is not only a physically barren land, but also a test of faith. However, it is precisely at this point that the truth of I Am becomes even clearer. God presents himself as the inexhaustible source of strength, patience, and supply. When Moses, in a moment of desperation, cries out to God, he responds directly and powerfully, guiding Moses to a new understanding of his sovereignty. The desert is not a punishment, but a school of faith. Dependence on God is the key to survival, and divine provision is something that never fails, even when human eyes see only the wilderness. The I Am is not only in the power to liberate, but also in the faithfulness to sustain, even in the most difficult situations. He is the God who always comes to the aid of his people, who never abandons those who are his. And as the people of Israel continue their journey through the desert, the I Am demonstrates its presence in subtle but powerful ways, a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night to guide them at every step. The desert then becomes the place where Israel begins to learn to fully trust God. And even in the midst of difficulty, people begin to realize that I Am is more than a name. It is a daily experience of care and provision. They were not alone. Over the years, the desert stopped being just a path between Egypt and the Promised Land. He became the stage for a profound inner transformation. There, amid the burning silence and constant difficulties, the people began to understand the true dimension of the name I Am, not as a distant echo from Sinai, but as a constant presence that enveloped, challenged, and sustained them. With each new test, a new miracle emerged. For every question, an answer. But not everyone could see it. Some continued to murmur, as if the past in Egypt still offered more security than the promised future. It was as if freedom came with an unbearable weight for those who were not willing to trust. Faith at that point was no longer an option. It was a vital necessity for survival. In this context, a new episode reinforces the divine identity of I Am. Moses climbs the mountain once again, alone. The people wait below, restless. And then, something great happens. God reveals himself with such glory that Moses' face shines when he descends. He carries not only the tablets of the law, but the living evidence that he was in the presence of the Eternal. People can't look into their eyes. There is something superhuman in that look. A shine that is not of this world. This moment marks a narrative turning point. The I Am is not just God speaking. He is the God who transforms. Moses' face, now shining, is a symbol of what happens to everyone who decides to truly approach him. The desert thus reveals its real purpose, not just to take the people from one point to another, but to shape a new identity. A nation that carries the light of I Am among the nations. However, the contrast between light and dark continues. Even before the glory of God, the people are lost once again. While Moses is on the mountain, they build a golden calf, an idol, a betrayal. The irony is brutal. While God seals his covenant, with Moses on high, the people break it below. Divine fury is awakened. Moses, in an act of indignation and pain, breaks the tablets of the law before the people. Judgment is immediate. Thousands perish that day. What seemed to be the height of communion becomes the bottom of the well of rebellion. And even so, the I Am does not abandon them. Here, one of the most mysterious and impactful aspects of his name is revealed. He is the one who is even when human beings stop being faithful. His covenant is firm, not by human merit, but by his immutable nature. The I am is constancy, even when everything around is unstable. This painful moment prepares the people for a new time, a time of reconstruction. God orders Moses to go up again. Prepare new boards, may it continue. The cycle begins again, but now with a deeper understanding. It is not enough to just listen to the voice of I am. You must obey. You have to trust, even when the path doesn't seem to make sense. The revelation was not just in the words, but in the process. God did not reveal himself as I will be, nor as I was, but as I am. Gift, constant, active. He is in the now. It is in the moment you doubt, in the moment you fall, in the sigh of your most desperate prayer. The I am was with Moses on the mountain, with the people in the desert, and continues to be present with those who call upon him in spirit and in truth. After the chaos of the golden calf and the judgment that fell on the people, the story enters more sensitive, deeper territory. The still open wound needed healing, and once again it was Moses who went up to the mountain, not to confront, but to intercede. With tablets in hand, he walked toward the same God he had seen in glory, but now carried the weight of a people who had failed. The I am awaited him, and the silence between them was as thick as the fog that covered Sinai. There at the summit, God does something extraordinary. He declares his name aloud. Lord, Lord God, compassionate, gracious, long-suffering, and abounding in mercy and faithfulness. This self-definition expands what was previously an existential statement. The I am now reveals himself as the one whose essence is grace, forgiveness, and justice. It wasn't just a name. It was a character, a divine identity expressed in continuous action. Moses, with his face to the ground, cries for mercy, and God responds not just with words, but with renewal. The tablets are rewritten, the pact is restored, and the people have one more chance. And here in this act, we see one of the most moving layers of I am. He is the God of second chances, the one who sees the fall, but still offers a new beginning. Upon descending with the new tablets, Moses finds a people marked, injured, but now more attentive. They have already seen the price of disobedience. They have already felt the emptiness of trusting idols. The glory on Moses' face remains, but it is no longer a fright. It is a reminder, a constant sign that God is with them, even when the journey is difficult. The days in the desert continue, and each step, each challenge, each battle takes on a new meaning, because now they're not just walking, they are being shaped. The I am is with them in every movement of the pillar of fire and cloud. It is in the manna that falls from the sky, in the water that springs from the rock, in the laws that teach how to live in holiness. It's not just a religion, it is an ongoing relationship with the one who is. And the story, despite the stumbles, points to something much bigger, because this name, I am, will echo again in an even more impactful way many centuries later, not in the desert, but in front of an equally lost people. A simple man from Nazareth will pronounce the same words that Moses heard on the mountain. And when he says, before Abraham was I am, time and eternity will collide. The God of Mount Horeb will once again be before humanity, only now in the flesh. This moment will be the climax of the revelation of I am. But until then, every scene of Exodus, every tear in the desert, every restoration and every fall points to that final encounter. The God who revealed himself to Moses continues to reveal himself, and his name never loses its power. Centuries passed, The people of Israel, marked by the promise, now lived under Roman rule. They waited for a liberator, for someone who would reopen the heavens like Moses in Horeb. But instead of thunder and fire, a Galilean carpenter appeared. He spoke with authority, healed with compassion, and walked among the rejected as if the sacred had bare feet. And then, in a moment that made time tremble, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was, not I will be, but I am." The same name that silenced Moses, the same presence that set the bush on fire. That simple man was saying he was the God of Exodus himself, and not just saying, he was proving it. The religious leaders shuddered. This was more than a statement. It was an affront. It was as if eternity had invaded the now. That which was unreachable on Mount Sinai now walked among men, touched lepers, forgave sins, and wept with those who suffered. The I Am had left the hill to live among us, and when they arrested him, it wasn't by force. When they questioned him, he responded with silence, the same silence that enveloped the summit of Horeb. But the most profound moment came when, in the garden, they asked who he was. And he replied again, "I am." With those two words, soldiers fell to the ground. Not by physical strength, but by the weight of eternity speaking in the present. And then came the cross. Yes, the one who said, "I am," was preached as a criminal. But there on that tree was the deepest mystery of all. The I am became man to become the sacrifice. The bush that burned without being consumed now burned, in pain for the redemption of the world. But what if this revelation isn't just historical? What if that name, which echoed from Mount Horeb and shook the foundations of Jerusalem, is still speaking to you now? Because what many don't realize is that the I Am is not just a name. It is a door. Yes, an invisible door between heaven and earth, which opens only to those who understand the weight of this statement. When Moses heard, he fell to his knees. When the soldiers heard it, they fell to the ground. When the apostles understood, they gave their lives for that name. But, and you, how many times have you prayed and felt like your words hit the ceiling? How many times have you sought God and not been sure if he was really there? Perhaps it is because you have been speaking with the idea of a God, but not with the I Am. There is a hidden secret in the way we talk to God. Jesus didn't just reveal the name, he showed the way to access him. And the most impressive thing is that this key is often locked in prayer habits that we inherit but never question. There is a wrong way to address the Creator, and it is closer to your routine than you imagine. Now imagine if all this time you were trying to connect with the divine in the wrong way. Imagine if you were calling, but not the way he taught. Get ready. Because in the next few minutes, you will discover what Jesus revealed, clearly, directly, and surprisingly, about how we should talk to God. It is not mysticism nor tradition. It's revelation, and it could be the answer to years of silence in your relationship with heaven. Remember when Moses, confused and hesitant, asked, "Who should I say sent me?" And the answer was as simple as it was profound. I am that. I am. In that moment, it wasn't just a name being revealed, it was an eternal identity being released. And today, that same voice echoes, not from a burning bush, but within hearts that desire more than religion, desire relationship. Jesus, when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am," was not just affirming his divinity, he was reopening the door of Horeb for us all. He has given us permission to call God Father, to come boldly into the presence of him who is. And yet, many continue to pray in a mechanical, repetitive way, like someone talking to a wall. We lose fear and we forget power, but now you know, You discovered that talking to God is not about formulas, but about recognition. That authority is not in how we begin a prayer, but in who we recognize when we open our lips. And that the I am does not require titles or flattery, just a heart that recognizes him for who he is, eternal, present, sufficient. Do not allow this revelation to be lost with the end of this video. Speak to God as someone who understands that he is in front of the I am himself. Don't just pray, answer. Because when he presents himself, he expects a reaction. And if this impacted you, share. Someone around you is praying in the dark, waiting for answers from the silence. Be the light that ignites understanding. And if you want to continue on this journey of revelations that go beyond the obvious, click now on the next video, because what comes next will further transform your way of seeing God.